Hi, and welcome everyone to Cape Ann ARTWaves, coming to you by way of 1623 Studios, located in Gloucester, Massachusetts. I'm Christine Fisher. My fellow co-producer, Jacqueline Ganem DeFalco, will be your host next time. We want to start out and thank our listeners and our sponsors who, honestly, without their support, the show would not be possible. Our sponsors are Prince Insurance Agency, M.K. Fisher, visual artist, Martha K. Anger of Compass Real Estate Brokerage, Protective Packaging, the Cape Ann Savings Bank, and Common Crow. What a hefty list. We thank them all for their wonderful support. We're also very appreciative to our partner, C-Arts, for being our marketing arm. C-Arts produces an online weekly news letter that features each of our guests, each of our artists. So if you're not signed up, please sign up. It's really worthwhile. We also want to thank 1623 Studios, who do such a terrific job with broadcasting our show. We want to give a shout out to our local musicians, Steve Lacey and Pat Verga, for their contribution of the original music. Our program focuses on bringing forward uniquely talented artists and makers, giving them a platform to share their artistic journey and their work. Encaustic painter Judy Schmid became smitten with the encaustic medium by a pivotal visit to the De Cordova Museum many years ago, and has been experimenting and showing her work largely on the North Shore ever since. Her venues include the Rockport Art Association and Museum, where she is an artist member and member of the experimental group. Judy has a piece in the Jackie's Flowers exhibition, which is happening now and up through May 29th. It's a tribute show to the botanical artist Jackie Harrington, who was a terrific artist and sadly passed away last December. I had the pleasure of interviewing her in November. She was a very active member of the experimental group. I'm showing Judy's piece now, titled A Year of Spring, which she'll talk about in just a minute. Judy is also active with the Marblehead Arts Association and has been showing her work also in Marblehead. Additionally, Judy has exhibited at the Charles Gallery and the Jane Deering Gallery, both in Gloucester, as well as the Encaustic Museum of Santa Fe. She is a member of the International Encaustic Artists Association and had a piece featured in their monthly magazine. Judy is also a member of the Monotype Guild of New England and has been featured in the Journal of Encaustic Painting. She has a marvelous YouTube video out titled Encaustic Painting with Judy Schmid. Check it out. Judy served as a board trustee with Montserrat College of Art, where she is now on their council. She's very passionate about the work that Montserrat is doing. Deeply rooted and educated in design, having graduated from the Newark School of Fine and Industrial Art with a degree in graphic design, Judy's former life includes owning her own graphic design business for 40 years. Judy's work has always filled me with wonder. We're really in for a treat. I want to share a quote that really resonated with me that I took from Judy's website. I paint the now. There are no yesterdays or tomorrows, only this moment, this emotion. I think that sets the table nicely for our conversation with Judy. Welcome, Judy.
Hello, Christine. Thank you very much for that introduction. You said it all. You pretty much said it all. That is
it's wonderful. Great to have you on the show, Judy. Welcome, welcome. Let's start things off. Give us some insight into your early beginnings.
Yes, one thing I would have to say right off the bat is I had hoped to film this in my new studio, and my studio is being built next door. I am so excited about it. But anyhow, yes. So moving on, my journey.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm very similar to all artists. I just knew at an early age that I was an artist, and I really didn't know what that meant when I decided to be one, but there's just something told me whenever I heard the word, yes, that's me. They described me to a T. So my journey has been a pretty much straightforward journey. At a very early age, I decided that I would make my living as an artist, and that I would go to art school. And after art school, I would go to New York City and I would get a job, and I would love that job. And by the time I was 19, I basically had done that. So
that is amazing, because, most of us don't have such a straight line. So how wonderful you were able to fulfill this.
Yes, and I had a lot of help along the way. I went to art school on a full scholarship, which I really could not have gone to art school without that. And at art school too, I was mentored with some wonderful teachers. And when I got to New York City, my boss was amazing. She was a great mentor, which I think nowadays a lot of graphic designers don't have that privilege, and that now you have to hit, you have to go to your first job and start working right away and understand everything. Whereas I learned an awful lot on my first job in New York City.
Well, just to be able to live in Manhattan at that time, I mean, lucky you.
So it was very, very exciting. And the downside was when you work in New York, especially in those days, you worked all day. You worked till 8 o'clock at night. You had very little other life. And so I took a weekend trip to Boston and fell in love with the city, decided that's where I had to live now. And so I went back to New York and I quit my job. And everybody said, "Oh, you'll be back." And they said, they all still wear hats and gloves in Boston. And so they always made fun of Boston, but I did. I came to Boston, and my next job was with Filene's department store. And I have to show you, this was in my early 20s. And I just have to show you, when I got there, as it turns out, I became the assistant art director to Bill Myers, who was the art director at the time. And I did the special projects. And they had decided to redo their packaging, a lot of the logos, that kind of thing. And I had to, my first project was to redo Filene's shopping bag from
my goodness. Oh my goodness. And it's actually beautiful. Wow.
This is where I was as a graphic designer. And, it was just wonderful. And so after, when he retired, I was with Filene. He and I worked together for 10 years, which was another wonderful step. The doors just opened for me. And then I decided to go off on my own. And after that, had various clients. And I think one of my favorite clients, which was probably after my shopping bag, like 20 years later. This is a series of calendars that I did for the Harvard Smithsonian.
Wow.
You can see they couldn't be more different.
Wow. How fun.
Yes, how fun. As a graphic designer, you approach every project very differently than a fine artist, because the finished product has already been conceived. The finished product is to be produced, and everyone agrees on this is what it will be. But in fine art, you walk into your studio and you don't know what the finished product is going to be.
That's such a good distinction, Judy. That's a really wonderful way to kind of sum it up, because the two are very, very different. You're right.
The challenges are very different.
And
you're
meeting somebody else's expectations too. It's all about somebody else's expectations as opposed to satisfying yourself.
Well, it's problem solving. Like, you're solving other people's problems with design, which is a great challenge. I loved every moment of it. But when all of a sudden you switch gears to fine art, as all the fine artists know, you're solving your own preconceived problems that you make up for yourself.
That's right.
Much more difficult, I think.
Right. Exactly. I would concur with that. Well, I love how you talk about this next section of your journey. You have broken it down. Talk to us about these very specific incidences as you refer to them.
As I thought about a journey is, there's certain pivotal points in a journey, certain turns. And I always say they're right turns. And the very first one was, after 40 years as a graphic designer, I was doing websites which have no great design satisfaction. They just worked. It was not a good place to be. And I was looking for something else. And I went to the decor of a museum, and there was this little tiny, like 8 by 8 inch. I think it was a encaustic that had some. With encaustic, you can also use photos as part of the design. And it had a part of it was a photo, and it had a beautiful texture and a beautiful opalescent glow, and I just loved what it looked like, and I had never heard that word before. So I, ran right back home, and I, looked up what it was, and I found somebody in Cambridge who was giving lessons, and I went and exposed myself to Encaustic, and it was great. I found it very interesting. So I got all the material, and I started working, and it just really appealed to me because it was very direct. I dabbled in ceramics and things like that, but there was the time lapse between doing it and seeing the results was too much for me. And Encaustic's a very direct, very immediate medium. And so I thought, well, this is really great. So as I started out, still having the mind of a designer, I thought, what can I make that everybody will appreciate and understand? The first nude is really almost a mistake. I was experimenting with using some photo images and some just regular painted images. And what happened is it didn't please me, but I thought, well, I'll just put this big black thing in the middle, and that's gonna kind of gel it all together. And so that was my first painting, actually.
Wow.
And so and I thought, oh, that's kind of fun. That's kind of great. And I did a few more like that, which actually sold right away. I think because everybody likes nudes. I mean,
how reconfirming. We've got a second one that I want to talk to as well. The second nude, are you doing anything different here with this piece?
The second
technique.
Yeah, the second nude is definitely it's a transfer. It's a photo transfer on a design background. So it's very similar. These are still painted on a hard wooden surface or a canvas surface. In other words, they're actually a painting. It's a straight out painting. And so that was very interesting, and I really like that. But I'm not a brush person, and you do use a brush. And I thought, well, okay. And I liked it because you never have to clean your brushes. You just put in Encaustic, you just put them down, and then you heat up the wax again, and you use them.
Right.
But then all of a sudden there was a second incident. I had been taking on and off classes. And then I thought, well, how about I read about this woman that was going to be coming to, I think she was in Agunquit. I forget now. Anyhow, she had designed this thing called a hot box, and she was introducing it to everybody. And so I said, well, I'll take a class. That looks kind of interesting. And what it was, it's a large box actually that's heated up from below with a big metal surface. And what you do is you actually paint on the surface. So this was even better because you don't have to use brushes. You can use the direct encaustic. And that was the thing that got me to, and also the big thing was it was paper. And I was accustomed to, because of all the printing, accustomed to going with paper, using paper, understanding paper better than canvas and things like that. So the third painting that I want to show you is California. And
talk to us about it.
So California is one of the first paintings that I did on the hot box that I actually also backlit. And when I backlit them, it changed a lot of things about the actual physical presence of the piece. And at the time that I was doing it, the Museum of Encaustic Art in Santa Fe was having an international show, and the title was The Environment. And when I read it, I had this piece called California sitting on my hot box, and it was all about all of the different things that affect California. All you can look in there and you can see there's a fire in there. There's everything, floods, mudslides. What was the other thing? Earthquakes. They're all layered, the things that California deals with. So I thought, this is perfect. So I sent it in, and it was accepted and also appeared in their magazine. So
that is fantastic. I have to say, I was so curious about this piece in particular. When I meant that your work fills me with wonder, it really does. It fills me with so many questions. And depending on how it's lit when you light them up,
right.
you get different impressions. I mean, really full of mystery. So thank you for explaining that.
They do. So that was when I started with that kind of started me off with the hot box, and then before that actually happened, all of my things on paper I was just framing regularly, and I was very pleased with them. I like the feeling of the papers, different papers. And what I used to do is, because I had big glass windows in my old studio I was renting, I would tape them on the window. And when I would tape them on the window, the light coming through actually affects how much, because of the combination of the encaustic and the papers. There's some of it is very transparent, some is translucent. It has different values that you don't see when it's just up against the wall. So I thought, oh, good. What I have to do is I have to somehow be able to get light behind them. So I thought, okay, well, there's the window, there's the light. So I got these little frames that were clear on both sides. And so I don't know, I think the next thing I'd like to show are my
Triad.
The Triads, yes.
The Triads, they're really pretty great, Judy.
So those were little things that I hung on the window, and I actually sold those because they were very simple to do. I would do a print, cut them up, put them in, and then I wanted to display them at a gallery. And I thought, well, all the galleries don't have those kind of windows. So the next thing I did was I made a freestanding light box. You have to show a picture of that.
Yes, we've got that. This illuminated display. I think you've got 9 images in this piece. It's very impressive.
It was very complicated to do that. I had to become an engineer because I had to get the lighting. I think I'm an engineer in my background, because I had to get the lighting to be very consistent. And so that was a big challenge. And it all stayed together miraculously for one show only. And then after that, I realized this is just not going to work. And someone at the show mentioned to me, Judy, why don't you just get lighted frames and put them on the wall? And so that was the incident that I thought, wow, why didn't I do that? It's so simple. So I did find lighted frames that are available online. And that's how I came to my final product, which I use now, which are illuminated encaustic installations.
Judy, I have a question for you about encaustic before we move on, because I want to talk to you about how you make art. And I'm sure everybody's very curious, so they want to learn more about this medium. But talk to me, do you feel like encaustic as a medium has really grown in the last 10 or so years? I seem to be bumping into more artists who are doing it.
Well, it's something that's so flexible, and almost any artist from any background can find something in encaustic that suits their technique and suits their individual, thinking, even 3 dimensions. I mean, because encaustic works very, very well on clay, on plaster. So, it can go for sculpture. It's just that kind of thing, I think. And the big problem, of course, with encaustic is that it's very toxic.
Right. So you have to really monitor your environment with all the right filters and airflow, et cetera. But let's jump ahead. And I have a wonderful quote that you shared with me. Inside each of my paintings, I search for a nugget of truth. I am seeking answers to questions I cannot really formulate. So talk to us. How do you make your art?
I have to go back to there's a saying by Georgia O'Keefe. I found I could not say things with color and shapes that I found I could say things with color and shapes that I couldn't say any other way. Things I had no words for.
I love that quote.
Me too. I think that is every artist, I think, really can appreciate that. I mean, you can talk about your process. That's a fairly easy thing to do, but to talk about how you approach that empty piece of paper or that empty canvas and where you go for that, where that leads you. And that's where you find the frustration. That's where you find the excitement. that's where you find the satisfaction. And I think it's very internal, and, you know, words are hard to come by that can really, you know, describe that.
Right. Right. Oh, I agree with you, because you are so in the moment. We have two more pieces before we really do more of a nosedive into your process.
Okay.
Let's talk about your next piece. It has a fabulous black background to it. I'm sorry, I didn't catch the title.
Passing time.
There you go.
Yes, that when sometimes when you go into your studio, there's something on your mind. There's something that you want to say. You know, you have a message that you're gonna work on, and this is what you're gonna be trying to do. And I always thought everybody is always concerned with time. Time. Everybody thinks of time. I don't have time. I have too much time. Where did the time go? And I thought, how would you show that, physically show that with an encaustic print? So I started by thinking of something that grows fainter and fainter as time goes away. And so I started on the left hand of that, almost like this is the beginning of the day, and the rest of it just sort of fades away to the other side. And so when I did that pleased me. I thought, well, I'm getting to sort of where I want to go. And then, as it turned out, the Rockport Art Association had a exhibit where you would look at a painting of one of their paintings, and then use one of your own paintings to describe how you would approach the same subject. Which I did, and that was one of the ones I used for that. And so,
that is such a poignant perspective. I mean, and how wonderful to kind of see this realized for yourself.
Yes, exactly. I think in the end, all artists I speak for, you have to satisfy yourself. You know, you know at the end of the day, if this is where you wanted it to be. And if not, no matter what other people say, you know, well, that's not exactly the way I want it. And some people surprise you and they like the things you discard, you know.
Right, exactly.
That's amazing, yes.
Exactly. We've got another one before we dive into process. Talk to us about this one. I just love the green striations in this.
Oh, Escape?
Yes.
Okay, Escape is something totally different. I did this during the beginning of the war in Ukraine. And when you walk into your studio, even though you think you're going to do something, whatever's happening in your life and your subconscious takes over, especially when you're creating. And I just somehow I picked that particular palette and I started working. And what I do at the end of the day is I usually take a picture of whatever I've done, and then I bring it home and I look at it so I can contemplate, what is this? What am I doing here? You know, where should I go from here? When I saw that, all I could think about is that feeling I had and the feeling people had. That was my escape, to go into the studio and work. So that was the first escape. And the second, I felt that was the feeling these people had of energy, of frustration, of the confusion, and trying to escape when there was no escape. And that's why it has a lot of frantic motion in it.
It does. And
that's how that came about. And I didn't expect, that wasn't what I was looking for, but that's what happened that day.
Well, I think you summed it up beautifully in terms of your unconscious really coming through and taking over.
It's a magic thing that happens, and you don't realize it. In fact, the piece that I did that you're going to show later on that I did for Jackie, I went in thinking flowers, 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 and I came out with something kind of different. But it was the flowers, you know. So. Yeah, it's
well, I mean, it's all up to interpretation too, you know.
Absolutely.
Really. Let's move on, talk about your process, because I'm sure a lot of folks are very curious, and I just love your approach, and I think I'd get so lost in all these papers and creating different combinations and putting them up on the window. So talk to us a little bit. We do have a piece to kind of assist us with your conversation. What's beyond?
Okay. What's Beyond was, I did a series. I don't usually do series, but we had some difficult situations in my personal life at that point. And I decided I needed to expose them to myself, or I needed to work through them. So I did a series that I called Internal Selfies. So I did my internal, I took myself and I went inside. And the last one I did ones of different emotions. But What's Beyond was the final one that I felt I had rid myself of the ghosts or whatever. And this one was like a little more optimistic, pointing to what's going to come next. And so that's how that one happened. All of my paintings have something that is happening in my life, even though I don't know it.
Right. Talk about healing art. I'm curious to know, how many did you do before you got to that final one where you felt like you had kind of exercised?
Basically, I did 4 that I kept, and I did quite a few that, as usual, some you put aside for later or whatever.
That's right. That's right.
Yes.
Or you just trash. We have another wonderful piece here. It's an abstract, Judy. Talk to us about that. Really gets into your process about cutting up your paper.
And this going viral.
Yes.
That kind of shows a little bit of everything. That what happens, how I start out basically is the hot box. You can use the actual cubes of encaustic. So you can use a medium if you want. You can use only medium because it changes the paper's ability to transfer light. So you're working with light, and you're trying to decide how the light is going to affect what you're doing. And you start out with a paper on the hot box. And what happens is you don't necessarily do a finished print, but you're going to do this is going to be part of the puzzle. So I might go in for, say, if I was going to start a whole new series or whatever, I would do like 10 or so a day. And I'd end up maybe in 3 or 4 days with, say, 30 of them that I want to use. And then the fun part is you have to start putting them together. And because the light is going to go through all these papers and all these colors differently, all these shapes, all these lines. So you have 30 times, I can do 1, 2 layers, 3 layers, 4 layers even, depending. So it's endless. I mean, you can spend untold hours, and every time you move the layer one that was third to second or first, it changes all the other colors.
I'm so fascinated by that process because that really intrigues me. I'd love to pop over to your studio sometime and watch you work, watch you create this magic. Because I'm a paper person as well. And I just think it's very intriguing to mix up these various shapes and these colors and create these looks.
Yes, it's a surprise. I call it mining the papers, because little nuggets come out, little things that you cannot ever imagine until you see them.
Right. And you can only kind of wrap your head around it once it's done, right?
Exactly.
On some levels. Yeah. Let's talk about this next piece. And I'm sorry, I don't have the title on this one, but I love the strength of the reds in this piece, Judy.
This is called Heartache. And it really wasn't a heartache, really. It was more when my husband and I were having an anniversary and we were planning a big party and all of this kind of thing. And I think it was in about that time. And I think I was thinking about, that kind of thing back when we were first married, all the things that, kind of pertain to your heart. And this was probably among many other ones that I did. But when I looked at it a while later, I went, oh, that looks like Heartache. I think that's what that is.
Oh, that's a lovely way to interpret heartache.
Yes.
I like that.
Like a nice thing. Exactly.
A nice thing as opposed to misery.
Yes, exactly. No, it's not miserable. It's a very happy one.
Let's talk about this wonderful piece that you did for Jackie. Walk us through.
Yes, I love Jackie. I knew Jackie, and everybody she's just such a wonderful person.
She was a great spirit.
Oh yeah, and I felt there were days that I felt, well, this is the day I'm going to do something for Jackie because I have to, I really have to. And so I don't do realistic things. So I thought, well, what can I sort of show? What can I bring to the table, so to speak, in honor of Jackie that wouldn't be like trying to do flowers and look goofy.
Yes,
so
right.
I thought I'll try to sort of show the aura of the flowers, more like how it feels to smell in the spring when the various flowers are starting to come up. And so that's basically what that's all about. Yeah.
I loved your title. I thought your title was really right on the nose. You know, you have such a unique perspective, Judy. You have such a wonderful way of lending insight to your work.
I feel that, every artist, and it's hard to put words in it, but every artist has these feelings that show on their paintings. You when you look at someone's painting, you know something about them.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So we have a last piece here before we're going to sign off, and this is such a departure. I love this. give us a feel for what's ahead.
Well, the one, Nella Lash is a wonderful instructor, and I was taking a course with her, and one of the things she wanted us to do was, use whatever you have available, and it was a little sort of project. And it was when I was between studios. I had nothing. All I had were the packing boxes and some black markers. So I took and cut up the packing boxes and drew lines all over and everything, and made this three-dimensional. Well, first it was one-dimensional, and then Nella said, "Judy, what are you going to do next?" And I said, "Well, what should I do, Nella?" She said, "Well, what do you think?" And I said, "You know what? I'm going to do a 3-dimension." So that's when I took it. And my challenge to myself for this one, it had to be only triangles. So every single piece in that had to be a triangle. And it took me all kinds of time, but I was very in love actually with 3D after I finished that. So,
that's a lofty challenge, and I love the geometry of it. Does this resonate with you in terms of a future direction? Might you do more?
It does. Yes, I like the idea of combining a flat design and then taking it and making it into something three-dimensional, which is what I did with that. Was a flat design, and then I just went from there. I just extrapolated from what I had done.
Well, for me too, I think who knows? With
my new studio, I may be able to do bigger things.
You're going to be dangerous in that new studio, Judy.
Yeah.
Listen, it has been such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so very much for joining me today as my guest.
Thank you very much, Christine. I enjoyed it immensely. It was wonderful to talk to you and wonderful to have the opportunity.
Yeah, good. I love it. I want to leave our listeners with your URL. If you'd give us a shout out in terms of where we can find you, and then we'll also post it on the screen. But
yeah, right now I'm in the Jane Deering Gallery. I'm in Rockport Art Association.
Yep.
And I guess soon to be in the Marblehead Art Association, their next spring show, or I guess it's the early summer show. And your URL is? Judy at judyschmid.com.
Okay, well, there you go. And I love your Instagram address.
Oh, Encaustic Lady. ENCAUSTIC Lady, LADY, all one word.
I love it. And for our listeners, be sure to check out Judy's video, which is listed on YouTube, Encaustic Painting with Judy Schmid. So Judy, I want to thank you again. I want to thank also our sponsors. I want to thank Anders Johnson for doing his magic with all of our videos. We couldn't do it without him. And for our listeners, for future access to our recordings, please check the screen behind me where we have all of the addresses, and also feel free to reach out to 1623 Studios or social media website for the most current listings. Thank you, Judy Schmid. What an honor.
Thank you very much, Christine.